Hey, welcome to Write More Light. My name is Sarah. I'm with the Midwest Writing Center, and today we're going to talk about writing a book review. It sounds pretty straightforward, I think, which is one reason I want to talk about it, because as I started into sort of freelancing as a book reviewer, I learned a lot. And I think it's really, really useful, especially since, book reviews that are published count as publications. They're a good, kind of difficult way of getting your writing written. And I think they're a lot of fun. Anyone can do them really if one likes to read. So that's exciting. As usual, we're gonna do I have a different cat with me today, and he is fat and pushy. As always, we're going to do the little lesson, talk about the topic at hand first, and then we'll get into what's up at the Midwest Writing Center and have our free write. His name is Fool. I'm sure there are folks out there watching who don't enjoy my cat cameos, but I mean, I apologize to you. They're just going to happen. So yeah, thank you for joining me, and let's get into the meat and potatoes. I need to think of a new phrase. I say meat and potatoes a lot for someone who doesn't eat meat. Okay, so first up, I think it's important to consider why you're writing a book review or why you're looking into it, and that will answer tons and tons of questions, because there are lots of, sorry, I'm trying to share the video. It used to do it automatically, and it's hard to do while I'm talking. There are a lot of reasons to write a book review, a lot of motivations for doing it. And if you know why you're doing it, it'll be a lot easier to do it and to find the right outlet for it. Now, sometimes I write a book review because I feel compelled to. The book was really powerful, or I really want people to know that the book exists. Every once in a while, it's because a friend wrote it. I usually put that in the text, and you should put that in the text of your book review. And there are easy ways. I'm going to write that down to mention that. There are easy ways to work that into the narrative of the book review, but from the outset, it's important to know why you want to do it. And it could be because you're inspired after reading the book, and it could be you're specifically reading this book to review it. And that's a different thing altogether. There's also like nice, fancy indie literary journals that publish book reviews, and that's a whole different ballgame. I haven't pitched a book review before to a literary magazine. I've only technically pitched a book review before, and it was dumb luck that it worked out. And I will get into that later. So I would say the general rule for if you are looking to publish your book review with a literary journal, you really need to be familiar with that journal, and you really need to look into what they're looking for. So if that's the case, and there are a lot out there, I suggest you can just use a search engine to find those places if that's your jam. But I think normally the way that would happen would be you're familiar with the publication and you're interested in the things that they're interested in publishing. It should be pretty organic. Otherwise, it's just not going to go well. And that's kind of my primary advice on writing in general, right? If it's forced, it'll feel forced. You don't, especially with book reviews, like you should never be doing it if you don't want to. A lot of the times there are things that we don't want to do that we have to do, right? And I would say, people who have careers in writing reviews, I guess, journalism, maybe this isn't the story you want to be reporting on, but you have to. I would say also there's probably always an angle that will motivate you more than the others. Generally speaking, I like to think that there's always another way to skin a cat. so to speak. The cat left, so fine to say things like that. Yeah, so I generally am writing the review for myself or for publication, and I already know the publication. If I'm writing it for myself, it's because it's important to me for some reason. There are books out there that I'm excited about, authors out there I'm excited about, authors out there who I think like I'm not familiar with necessarily, but I think that their name should be out there. And so I sit down with that book when I'm finally reading it. I'm also someone, I've talked about this before, who doesn't just sit down and read books. Books generally really need to call to me. So if I sit down to read a book for review, sometimes it's a little difficult for me. I feel really privileged that when I've been able to write reviews for publication, that it's usually been poetry, because that's much easier for me to sit down with. I would say short stories are like that too. It's something about, the sections are smaller and it makes me feel less tied to it. That said, when I have done longer text reviews, it's gone really, specifically for publication, which I know in advance, right? It's gone really well for me. And that's really lucky that I've just been engrossed by these books. That's not the most common thing in the world for me. And I think it's important to be straightforward and honest with you as I'm sharing this information. Some people can just sit down and read, and I envy them a great deal. It's super, super not easy for me, but I think I might be a minority in that. It's hard for me to say. So, yeah, I said that. So book review writing is not self-explanatory. It is not, and I'll get into this a little more later, but it is not like writing a book report. You're not writing it to prove that you read it. I cannot emphasize enough that this is not explaining a book to people. It's explaining how a book made you feel. It's explaining the experience of the book, but not the book itself. If you tell me everything, then I have no reason to read it. But if you tell me, book reviews don't have to be positive too. So if you tell me everything about the book and it's just facts, first, I have no reason to read it. I already know everything that happens. Second, I don't know what the reason is to read it, or I don't know if it's good or bad. Granted, we all have different tastes, but if I read some really strongly worded review of a restaurant, I'm gonna be swayed. Like, that's just how it is. If the reviewer is like, this food is garbage and tastes like sewage, and I saw barefoot people in the kitchen, probably not gonna go to that restaurant. If the reviewer says something along the lines of, I'm not a fan of this kind of food, however, I can tell that it was prepared with care, and these tastes really mingled well together, then I might try that food. The biggest thing is to read carefully and to take notes. Taking notes is the hardest part, and reading carefully is a close second. It's when something's really consuming, it's harder to read carefully, because you're in the book, right? You're immersed in it. And that's awesome. And that says a lot about the quality of the book, right? Because it is engrossing you. So you sometimes will have to force yourself to slow down. I've noticed that before with myself. Well, where I will put like a bookmark in at some section or make myself stop at, you know, the end of the chapter or the end of the essay or whatever, and reflect a little bit if I know I'm going to be reviewing this book, or if I decide, you know, partway through the book that I think that it deserves a review because I want the whole world to know about how engrossing this book is, then I'll force myself to pause and take notes. We talked about, when I had Ryan on, we did a lexicon. Lexicon is like a personal dictionary. We talked about close reading, and that is reading in such a way where you are paying attention to the details, to stuff like intertextuality, right? Is this text in conversation with the text that came before it? Or, and text here is an all-encompassing word for art, really. You want to read like a writer or read like a student, whichever makes more sense to you, honestly. When I say read like a writer and read like a student, I'm saying the same thing. I want to learn from what I'm reading. I'm looking for themes or for repetition, because you don't necessarily know at the outset that something's going to be a theme. But if, you know, I see blue jays 4 times in the first chapter, I might be like, am I gonna pay attention to blue jays? Maybe I don't even notice though. And then later on, I'm like, hey, did they mention this exact same kind of bird earlier? Maybe I'll go back and read for that. Maybe I'll look it up. I usually read on paper. I do have an e-reader, which has the awesome feature of you can search, right? Like a PDF, which is awesome, but harder to do with a real book. Note too, the things that you like or dislike. Note the things that make you uncomfortable. If something gives you any kind of feeling, you want to take note of that. Surprises, the use of language, tropes. Language can mean anything, really. Use of language, depending on the writer, could be a million different things, you know. On the second person versus direct address talk that I did last week, I talked about the book Why We Broke Up. And Daniel Handler has this great flexibility of language. You know, I've read a lot of his books and they're all very different. And in this book, the speaker is a teenage girl and she speaks very plainly. So it's also really notable when she uses these really, she uses really beautiful language sometimes, and it's still simple. It still sounds like the same speaker, but you notice when there's a particularly pretty, for lack of a better word, combination of words. And just take note of the stuff that you notice. But when I say take note, I mean literally write it down. And importantly, if something affects you, if something gives you feelings, if something moves you or upsets you, ask why. You don't necessarily have to shut down your whole day to do that, but it is important to reflect on that if you want to write about it later. Because if, I mean, I generally try not to write about books I don't like unless I've agreed to write a review and then I end up hating it, right? I personally try to write only about books that I liked, and this is an and, books that I think deserve attention. So generally speaking, I'm not going to be reviewing classics or stuff in the canon because I don't think they need more attention. That said, if something like really blows my mind, just I might just. For instance, the Kurt Vonnegut book Bluebeard. I don't think I wrote a proper review of it ever. The review I put on Goodreads was, this book makes me want to take full advantage of being alive. So I told everyone and I posted pictures of it. That's a book people already know about. Vonnegut's very famous. He's also dead and white. So like, generally speaking, not someone who needs more attention, not an underrepresented group. But the book blew my mind, so I wanted to talk about it. I guess that was a bad example because I said I don't think I wrote a proper review of it, but all the same. It is a book that probably has enough attention, but I still think may deserve more. So whether you like it or dislike it. If something stops you, if something makes you uncomfortable, if something makes you emotional, like sad or cranky or whatever, think about why. Think about what the author did in that moment that was evocative. Sometimes it's, the action of the scene, like a character died and that was sad. But sometimes it's the language surrounding what happened, right? Maybe a baby was born and it's a totally happy event, except that the narrator is grieving, right? Grieving a lost child of their own, or grieving someone in their life who died recently, or grieving that they don't have a partner because they're so envious of this beautiful moment in somebody else's life. And that makes you sad because they did something really crafty with language surrounding this beautiful, happy occasion, because the primary focus was on somebody's feelings that were sad. It's useful to notice these things because, especially if it's something incongruous, like a happy occasion that gave you sad feelings, there's two things that are going on there. Either it struck home for you and you have been in that situation, right? Or the opposite, you have, you are the person who's grieving in this happy moment. And that's important to note because when you go to write your review, you're going to want to put yourself into it. I'll talk about this a little bit more later, but if there's nothing personal about it, then there's no reason for the audience to invest in your review. But also, maybe what happened was just that writer is that good at what they're doing. Maybe they were dropping breadcrumbs along the way that you didn't notice until you had the feeling. That's something that happens a lot. Really, really good writers drop breadcrumbs that we don't notice. And sometimes that's like foreshadowing, and sometimes it's building tension. That's the beauty of the art, right? On taking notes, I find inline and in book notes really helpful. A lot of people are very anti-writing in books. I don't know how those people do it, but sticky notes exist. You've got probably an app on your phone, you've got a computer, you've got a notebook. I find that slightly harder because I'll have to like write down a page number. Where if I'm writing in line or in my book, I can circle the page number and then I'll just flip through. I have an example with a book I reviewed recently. Oh my goodness, it's not near me. I thought it was sitting here. Oh no. Well, I wrote page numbers in the back of the book so that I would be able to find the things that I later wanted to put, which is, oh, so annoying. I really thought it was right here. Okay, sorry everyone for the delay in my talking. But yeah, just in the back of the book, I wrote page numbers. Like I wrote like a cue, and then I wrote page number if I wanted to quote something on that page, or page number and then theme. And I wrote it on, like, many times books have a blank page in the back or that. And that's where I would take these notes if I was doing something like that. I don't know if I did it with this book. A lot of the times, yeah, I did. A lot of the times when I'm reading nonfiction, I will note things that are referenced, like other texts, right? Something that shows up in the footnotes or whatever. Other times with this book, How to Love a Jamaican by Alexia Arthurs. It's the one that I just showed you this blank page from. I just took notes there because I knew partway through, I was like, I want to review this book. This book is doing something special, something different. And what I wrote, here you can see, there's not a ton there. But I wrote a universal understanding of what it means to be human. Easily shows the place where the soul lives. Simple sentences with profound meaning, each much more than they appear. Bare truths, uncomplicated, delicate phrasing, and quotable. So all of that surely went into the review I wrote that I don't remember writing. This book came out, obviously it's paperback, so sorry, I love you, don't break. So I didn't have the first edition, right? So my book review was for fun. But all of that went directly into the review because those are things that I thought was important to note about that book. She uses simple phrasing to show universal truths in easy sentences everyone understands. And I'm sure I went much more eloquent in writing, I promise. And I'm sure I went into more depth about what that means. You can't just say delicate phrasing and then, do you know what that means without it being explained? I know what I mean, but I can't expect you to. When I say something like delicate, I mean that it's careful. You have to put it together in such a way that it does a very specific thing, right? Yeah, I write in my books and I don't have any shame about it, and you shouldn't either. However, if it is not your preference, get a notebook for it. Currently, well, I'm about done. I'm reading a book by, do I have it near me? Yes. Tariq Shah will be one of our Collins Writers Conference faculty members. I'll be teaching the novel. And because he's our faculty, it was important to me to read his book. But this book does not have anywhere for me to write on it in the back. And that's fine. So I did this. This is just my feelings. This ends really early, but this is the prettiest way for me to show you. This is like 10 pages, 20 pages into the book. I said, as someone who has been to a lot of funerals, first few pages really got to me. The opening is like pretty vague and just sort of generally about funerals. Very clearly influenced by poetry. So I might put that phrase in a review, but what I would say is it's clear that Shah is influenced by poetry, by his use of X and Y tools, phrases, not phrases. The stuff that people use in poetry. And then I wrote, this is seriously all it says on this. I started using a different piece of paper. Vague, creepy, Narcissian crayons, Palahniuk vibes. So that's it. Just have a piece of paper to write this stuff down. If I had it on that and not in my super messy journal that you can't decipher anything if you're not me, I would also have like, oh, I wanted to quote this thing on page 56. Let's do some other, oh no. One of the books, like I said, is not sitting next to me and I really thought it was. I don't know where it is. Pretty annoying. So here are a couple that I wrote. These are both poetry that I knew in advance I was writing a review of these books. This one, I didn't take any notes in the back, but you can see all I have to do is flip through. This is just the intro. I underlined a lot of stuff because it was useful background information on the book. I circled page number and page number. Oh, didn't circle that page number. Circled the page before. Because I thought that those poems worked best as a unit. Obviously I have my own shorthand, but there's other stuff like just flipping through or not. Here we go. There's lots of markings, right? These are places where I want to quote or I want to reference, and I know it by my own shorthand. And then, okay, so this is Gravity Well. I think his last name is Reiki, Mark. I took notes in the back, and they say things like, have to read each poem many times, lost in long sentences, many calendar references, work with the moon, but also mortality, health and weather. This book should be read quickly. Observational, simple universals, domestic, playful, question mark. Yeah, and then I mark those things. I don't know if I did it here. Yeah, I did. When I read anthologies, so a collection of poems or essays or stories, I mark my favorites just with symbols. I've again kind of developed a shorthand with that. So a dot is I like this poem. A dash is I love this poem. More than that is more than that. Sometimes there's stars, sometimes there's hearts. Sometimes there's a big open circle, sometimes there's an X. Generally, I think a star means like, wow, this is a real standout, and a heart means like, I really love this deeply and personally. I know I should know my own shorthand, but here we are. So there's some examples of how I prep for a review. Now I'm going to show you some actual reviews. So the first one I'm going to show you is one I wrote for fun because I was compelled to. I'm going to, I would say this one's probably my average length for a book review. I'm going to read the whole thing, maybe. I think I'm going to read the whole thing to you. But it is not, I don't think this is typical of what you would find in a traditional publication. It's just, I felt this one needed to be shared, which is amazing. It's about a book. Here, let me hold it up before I screen share, that it was wildly popular. Can you see it? Okay. Again, this is a paperback, so not the original edition. The original hardcover was yellow. And I stared at it and I just really liked the cover. And that's not what made me buy it. I learned that Liz Lenz knows or has worked with the author. And I was like, all right, well, it's got a pretty cover. People like it and Liz endorses it. So yeah, so here is the review. It's for the Super Secret Bookstore. That is a local publication, kind of, which is mostly just book recommendations you can buy and book reviews. So here we go. That's my face. That's the book cover. I know. Everyone has already told you to read Trick Mirror by Gia Tolentino. Here's the thing. None of those people were me. Do you wish you had the movie best friend as a kid who always gets you into trouble, but the only trouble you were actually interested in, and then but only the trouble you were actually interested in, and then movie best friend actually saves your life? You two happen to live really close to each other and you can use your flashlight or tin can codes and you actually tell movie best friend your truest, deepest, darkest secrets. Think of Now and Then or The Goonies. Yeah, me too. Movie best friend is Gia Tolentino, and in Trick Mirror, she's telling you all the stories you've never heard. Occasionally, okay, I'm a little hungry and I space out, but when she gets excited, it would take an emergency for me to tear away from her. Here's another question for you. Did you once deny you were a millennial because the descriptions you heard straight up sounded like they were describing children? And since you actually learned you are a millennial, you sort of worn it begrudgingly and defensively? Yeah, Gia Tolentino will make you goddamn proud to be a millennial because she's proud to be a millennial. All right, the content. In 9 deeply personal, borderline obsessively researched essays, Tolentino writes reflections on self-delusion. That's the subtitle of the book. I think she writes the story of life as a millennial, except her takes are more interesting than the stories we tell ourselves in our heads. Taking a nod from Thomas King, the truth about stories is that's all we are. And that's a blessing. We deserve to give ourselves more credit. The highest praise I can give to any essay goes to A Story of a Generation and 7 Scams. I would also give unbridled praise to We Come from Old Virginia, Ecstasy, and Pure Heroines. This is a book of essays, so it's a low pressure read. Sit down with an essay a day and go on with your life. But you also get to go on with your life with these stories inside you. Tolentino is obviously an excellent writer. I know you know because this book has been out for 13 months and no one will shut up about it. But her real gift is giving us stories that will stick with us, make us think, and make us live. I was really proud of that review, and I wrote it because I needed to. I needed to tell people how great this book is, how much it affected me, how much I loved it. But traditionally, a book review will quote the book, for one thing. it'll cite specific things. I don't do that. I cite specific essays and I talk about a feeling that I had, and that's not, normally you want to be more specific. You want to ground the essay on something that a reader can pinpoint themselves. You want to give qualifications for the statements you make. So now to a more traditional review, also one of mine. Okay, I was like, oh no, there's an ad at the top for an event. And I was like, I didn't do that. This one I wrote, I was contacted because I do some freelance work for Little Village magazine in Iowa City, Cedar Rapids. And they asked me if I was interested in reading a book about crossword puzzles. I'm gonna grab it. I did not, I read it as a PDF, which was unfortunate. It is a gorgeous, thick book with images, which is fun. Sorry, there was a moment I wanted to, there's some word games inside it. Sometimes it breaks down into lists. Yeah. Here's it explains some games that this is a pipe that happen inside crosswords that I didn't know anything about. There's some really fun footnotes. I would recommend reading this as a physical book personally. So there's a lot of fun going on in it. Anyway, I'm going to show you my review of the book. And something important about this is when I wrote this review, I had a couple of negative things to say, and I was really nervous about that. The most I've really done if you're doing it professionally, if you're doing it for money, if someone asks you to write a review, you must be honest. You must be honest. I always say, I was asked once, and now it's something that I always say, that your first obligation is to the text, not to the audience, not to the artist, not to the publication that is featuring you, but to the text. So I had a couple negative things to say about this book, but overall, I really loved it. And I felt kind of weird about that. I wasn't ambivalent about the book, but there were some negative things that I felt, and I told the editor, these are qualms that are personal for me. I don't know if that matters to you, because I wasn't sure if my negative feedback was publishable or universal. And they published it because it's important to include that stuff. This is a review for everyone. And you're never going to be the only one who feels something. Sorry to burst your bubble if you thought you were. Let me see if anybody's hanging out with me right now. Hi, I see you hanging out. I was looking for comments, but I don't have any. So I'm going to now screen share that review. I think it's a little longer, not much longer. Book reviews generally, I believe, are 500, 750 words as a general, not as an always. If you are looking into one of those they don't have to be indie, literary journals that looks for reviews, they often want longer ones. Okay, officially screen sharing. And the reason I am sharing my own is specifically to say I know what I'm talking about. But I will say I always am really excited about the reviews that Little Village does. And something important about those reviews to me is that they all have a local connection. This one was because she was doing an event locally. The two poetry books that I showed earlier were also reviewed for Little Village, and they were local writers from the General Johnson, Lynn County area. And that's really cool too. I really love reading local. It's important to me to be aware of what literary things are going on in my area. And it's important for me to be in touch with that, especially contemporary work, which often gets ignored. If you live in an area that has Little Village magazines available. They're free, and you should get them and you should read them. They also, of course, have a website, which we are using right now. I will screen share now. Okay. So this is the bit where I was like, wait, what? I didn't do that. I'm not Micah. But no, here's my name there. I love to tell people that I want to learn everything. When I was asked to read a book about the history of crossword puzzles, I thought, well, that's not a topic I would have picked, and agreed. And the first page told me how the crossword puzzle was invented in 1913. I could not imagine how this book could possibly be over 300 pages. I ended up so consumed by thinking inside the box that I was disappointed when I realized I only had 3 pages left. When the first page told, I already read that, Thinking Inside the Box by Writers Workshop alum Adrienne Rafel is a lot of things, but it is not at all inaccessible or esoteric. I don't do crosswords. I had to look up a lot of words. For instance, did you know that people who like crossword puzzles are called cruciverbalists? I may not be pronouncing that right, but that's my guess. Verbalist, cruciverbalist. But there was something immediately welcoming both in Rafel's voice and in her content. I may not be pronouncing her name right either. It could be Raffle. This felt less like a history lesson and more like being invited into a friendly subculture where everyone brings snacks. In the 3rd chapter, Rafel drops the confines of third-person narration and introduces herself to the audience like she's been waiting to let us in on a secret. We met Rafel at a writing residency in the Berkshires where she is slaving over the construction of her own crossword. This is the first time Rafel states that she is not a crossword person, but comes from a family of puzzle and game lovers. It's almost meta-level narrative when she describes creating her own crossword puzzle or going on a crossword cruise, as Rafel insists she is not on their level. Meanwhile, she has lovingly crafted a treatise to honor the puzzle and those who love them. I want to give a shout out to Little Village arts editor Genevieve Trainer for making my words so much prettier than they are when I write them. Editors are underappreciated. I'm going to skip a bit down to this. Well, I really love this book. There were moments where Rafel missed her own blind spots. In addressing how crossword puzzles are often used to signal intelligence, yet have historically been more accessible to middle and upper class people, she doesn't spend much time discussing the consequences of this gatekeeping. When describing a rift between the old guard and new during the Oreo Wars, that's a real thing. Very interesting. She uses the term the Young Turks for the new guard, a term that even the journalism group of this name has apologized for using and changed their name to initials. So these were the 2 negatives that really bothered me about the book. She talks about how it's a problem that people use crosswords to discuss intelligence. And she says it's a problem that it's generally only accessible to people who have the free time and education to do them. But she doesn't talk about why that's a problem. She doesn't talk about ways of fixing that problem. And then instead of just saying the old guard and the new guard, she uses the term the Young Turks, maybe just to change up her language, but it's a problematic term. And that those 2 things really bothered me. And it was really important that I keep them in there, but I felt like maybe I was biased by being upset about those things. Moving on. Still, she goes to great lengths to show moments in which the crossword has brought people together, helped memory patients, and caused military security issues. Thinking Inside the Box is an educational romp. It inspired me to try the first crossword puzzle of my adult life, and more than anything, it is a love letter written by a poet to the 100 years of cruciverbalists who shaped her world. I had a great time reading that book, and I had a great time writing about it. I think that's the first time I've ever used the word romp. And I always love when I see the word romp in reviews, and I've never imagined using it. I'm happy about that. Cool. So to recap, don't write a book report. This is not a statement of facts. This is not you proving to me that you read the book. Do not include spoilers. Do not summarize the whole book. Do include the personal. Not to the extent that like recipe blogs do, where people are like, okay, moving on, where's the review? But talk about yourself, what you experienced while you were writing it, what feelings you had. Do say who the book is for. Neither of the examples I just gave specifically did that. But it is a useful thing to do. It's just a little bit tricky to work in naturally. I do it a lot at the end. When I'm excited about a book, I'll be like, this is for everyone who wished they were a poet and felt that they were really meant to not allowed to be poets. This book is for all millennials. I said that in the Trick Mirror review. So this book is for millennials. In my review of Night Rooms, which is a book I'm really excited about, and the one that's not sitting next to me, even though I think I've talked about it. Just because I look more than once doesn't mean it shows up. I say, it's a book for poets and horror fans and folks interested in the experimental. Excuse me. Normally I have water here. Oh, I do have water here. It's where the book is not. Yeah, it's not super easy to do naturally. But it's an important thing to do. So the audience knows like you're thinking about them. Normally I would advise against thinking about the audience, but in a book review, it's useful. Say why you felt the way you did. In the Tolentino Trick Mirror review, I said, as a millennial, I feel like I'm getting pooped on a lot. This book made me feel like I was in solidarity with everyone else. You don't have to say it so explicitly. Like in the Thinking Inside the Box review, I said it's a romp. I said that she talks about herself. She makes it almost meta. I skipped a couple paragraphs in it, but she amusingly is tailed by her parents to an event that she goes to, which I think says, I felt this way because it was fun. Explore the things that you feel strongly about. I really cannot speak enough to how silly it is that I thought that I shouldn't include my negative feelings about that book because they're important. If I had written, let's see, what's a book that I hate? I've talked on this show before about hating the book less, and a lot of people loved it. It was a Pulitzer winner. If I wrote a review of that book, and I have not. I was thinking maybe I did on Goodreads. But if I wrote a review of that book, I would say nothing nice about it. That's not true. It uses pretty language, and the ending made me smile. But when I think about the book, I just get angry. So if I were, for some reason, writing a negative book review that was exclusively negative, which is either because someone asked me to do it or because I hated the book so much, I wanted everyone to know that the book was despised, that would take more ego than I have. Because bringing attention to something in a negative way is just not my jam, and I don't think that I'm that important. And if people want to read, I want them to read. But if I were going to make a negative review, I would say, this book frustrated me, and I wanted to quit reading it over and over and over again. I wanted to quit reading it. And the reason I kept reading it is because I was reading it alongside friends. It was important to my friendship that I stick with it. And then I would say, I wanted to put it down because the pacing bored me. It moved really slowly. I would say it frustrated me because the character would be self-deprecating, and then he would keep doing the things and keep crapping on himself. And that's real. That happens in life. But I don't enjoy sitting through it, right? What's it called? The experiencing embarrassment, secondhand embarrassment, or secondhand self-hatred is just not something I want. It also, I didn't feel it also didn't make it effective from what I could tell. It wasn't frustrating because it was supposed to be frustrating from what I could tell. It was frustrating because I had to sit through it. I just said that I didn't think this was a useful thing to do, and then I did it. All this to say, if you have to write that review, do it, but you have to explain yourself. You have to defend your stance, and you have to explore why you have these strong feelings. You know, is it because the character reminds me of my best friend in junior high who abandoned me by embarrassing me in public? Maybe that's why I feel strongly about it. Maybe that's something that actually speaks really highly of the text, that I could find it so personal. I That's not what's happening here, but that is something to explore, and it is something that enriches your review. Um, I usually only write for fun reviews if I like a book, and also, I've already said this, also if it's a lesser known author. Um, I advise everybody really look into the world of book reviews, and particularly the reviews published by the publication that you're interested in. I cannot believe I've talked about this for 50 minutes. I thought this was going to be a short, short video. Read. This is true of any time you want to publish, but read the publication that you want to write for, and consider other outlets. I enjoy writing for the secret bookstore because there's not a lot of parameters, and I write when I'm excited about a book. There's, I talk about bookstagram sometimes. I love the visual. Personally, I love looking at people's pretty pictures of books, and then they're followed by reviews. I sort of tried to do a bookstagram, but I don't have the patience or probably the artistic eye to take these pretty pictures. So it's not for me. But I like to, I use Instagram to talk about my professional life sometimes, when I do readings. And so I also, post pictures of what I'm currently reading. And that's fine, but mine are not pretty, and I'm never going to be famous on Bookstagram for my beautiful pictures and eloquent reviews. But these are things that are out there for you. Twitter loves readers. Blogs exist. There are blogs that post multiple people's reviews, like the Secret Bookstore, that are out there, or you could start your own. It's a cool thing to do if you enjoy writing book reviews, if you enjoy talking about books. I am not in the blog world personally. I was once upon a time. But I can say, if you are in the blog world, you know how to find your friends. You can find a circle of people who love what you do and who you love what they do, and they'll, be your audience. And that's really exciting. Okay. If you were only here for the book review portion of the show, please go forth, write more light into your life. Write more light into your life. For folks interested in the up and coming, my calendar is under my computer, events at the Midwest Writing Center, I am happy to tell you. This Thursday, we're doing an earlier show. It's going to be at 12 noon Central Time, which is 10 a.m. Pacific Time. We're doing an interview with upcoming debut novelist and wonderful human being, Carolyn Hune. Her first book, called Fortunes of Jaded Women, will be out on Atria Books, which is an imprint of Simon and Schuster. So this is a really big deal. Next summer 22. So we're going to be her first big. That ego of mine is just very small. We're going to be her first interview about this process. She's really talented and really cool. I luckily am getting in on the ground floor because I went to college with her. We were in a production of Vagina Monologues, so feel very privileged to you feel privileged to have this outlet. I'm super excited about that. She's really cool. I'm gonna oh, I have it up on the wrong computer. Give me just 1 second. I have two computers here and only one has her website open. Okay, I'm gonna screen share with you and read you her bio, but you're gonna be here with me on Thursday, right? So you're gonna see it then. She writes about the Vietnamese American identity, diasporic. I say diaspora all the time, but I don't say diasporic. witches of the West Coast and tall tales her mother would tell her in a humorous way. Her nonfiction work has appeared in Diacritics, the International Examiner, and others. She studied journalism at Seattle University and human-centered design and engineering at UW for her master's degree. She's the coolest, really. You're really, really in for a treat. I feel like I cannot say enough about what a big, exciting opportunity this is to speak with her in advance of this book, because it sounds like it's going to be really, really fantastic. And I think she's going to blow up. I think it's going to be really, really dope. Beyond that, on May 22nd, we've got our first live outdoor Ros Talks show of the year. It'll be headlining Beth Roberts with her new book, Like You, out on I can't talk, y'all. Fence Books. We've got Shishwen Collins with Flowing Water, Falling Flowers, which is, of course, with MWC Press. And we've got Kaylee Cool, who had a chapbook out last year. It won the University of Iowa chapbook contest, so big deal. She's an amazing slam poet. We've had her on before, not here, but we've featured her at readings before. We've featured all of them at readings before. They're all really incredible women and writers, and it's going to be a real serious treat. And our first show at Ros Talks of the year, that of course is outdoor, and it'll be at 7:30 p.m. and it'll be really, really excellent. Next Tuesday, we're going to talk about the epistolary. So last week we talked about second person versus direct address. Epistolary is letter or diary writing. Generally speaking, that would be direct address. Then we're going to have Araxi Cass on next Thursday, talking about social justice and identity writing. We're skipping the 18th. And then on the 20th, we're going to have Jennifer McBain Stevens of Iowa City Poetry on, which is going to be excellent. The live event they had on Saturday, Iowa City Poetry had, was amazing. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what's in the future of Iowa City Poetry, what events they do, what they're offering online, etc. Then we had to reschedule because I was sick from the shot number 2 of the COVID vaccine. We rescheduled the live critique, so I will be very vulnerable. We talked about vulnerability and why that's important previously. I suggest you check out those videos if you haven't. Skylar Alexander, friend of the Midwest Writing Center and poet extraordinaire and author of, she does have a book coming out, but I'm saying she created the Don't Be a Dick and Workshop guidelines. So she's going to critique me, and I'm going to be bringing a fresh poem to her. And you've heard me say many times that I don't see myself as a poet. So lots of vulnerability there. And then on the 27th, we're also going to do some more vulnerability. We're going to have our first panel. We're going to talk about dealing with rejection in the writing world. We're going to have a lot of bad, I just was going to not say badass. We're going to have a lot of really awesome writers from the area on that panel, including director of the Midwest Writing Center, Ryan Collins, author Misty Urban, poet Philip Goldfarb Sturt. He's also a professor at St. Ambrose, poet and professor at St. Ambrose, Emily Kingery. I feel like I'm forgetting someone, but maybe not. It's going to be really excellent. We also, of course, are still doing Writers Studio the first and third Saturdays of the month. That is 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. on Saturdays, first and third Saturday of the month, Central Time. I'm going to be on Living Local on CBS WHPF on Thursday to talk about things like the Young Emerging Writers Internship. Applications are due May 15th. It's still the coolest internship I can think of. It is paid. We talk about writing, we write a lot, we learn to workshop, and we learn to put together a publication, a whole beautiful publication. I always do this. I always reach and I'm not fully prepared for this one. This is last year's. This is gorgeous. It happened online last year. It's going to happen online this year. So we're happy to take applicants from outside our usual service area, which is exciting. look, we've got visuals. This art was by an intern. Obviously, all the art inside is by interns. It's a really, really beautiful experience, and I'm really, really, really excited to be a part of it again this year. The Collins Writers Conference is coming up, as always, June 24th through 26th. Yes. We are obviously featuring, I'm doing a lot of promotion about that, but we're going to have some really, really amazing writers who are all also really amazing teachers this year, including Jill Mina with the short story, Liz Lenz on the personal essay, Tariq Shah on the novel, Gail Marie Thompson on poetry. I love the title of her course. It's Unabashed Gratitude in Difficult Times, I believe, and keynote speaker and masterclass with Allison Joseph. It's going to be so incredible. We also, of course, have some tuition assistance available. So get to our website, register. Those authors are offering critiques too for $50. We also will have manuscript pitches with MWC Press and with Legacy Book Press. It's such a wonderful experience. We've got a participant open mic. We're gonna have a faculty reading. It's the highlight of my year every year. It really, really is. And of course, we've got Birdies for charity. If you have been thinking about donating to the Midwest Writing Center, the best way to do that is through Birdies for Charity. We are 1370 at Birdies for Charity for the John Deere Classic. The reason that the best way to do that is through Birdies for Charity is because in addition to the regular 5% match on donations through Birdies, we also have some donors who are willing to match up to $10,000. So your gift to us will not just go double, but double and 5%, which is amazing. That makes such a huge, huge difference to our ability to program, to provide accessible programming, and to bring excellent teachers and authors and performers to you. We are at 2 p.m. I would like to challenge you today. I'm going to not do the free write live today. So I feel like I've been looking at myself for too long, if I'm honest. But I challenge you to write a book review or to practice. I sometimes find it useful to do an outline, really just choose a favorite book or maybe a book that you really, really hate. Leave some spots to quote inside the book. And find somewhere where you can pitch a review. As always, please write more light into your life.